So some time passes, either that same day or a day later, I don't know. Time's blurry. Bryce comes out of her room at some point and is like, Hunt, I know where we can find more Crystallo's venom for Rune's Medwitch. And Hunt's like, what? Because she had blown off that appointment, by the way, that her mom set up for sure. Wasn't gonna go, even though Hunt offered to go with her. She was like, yeah, I'm not going. So this time she's like, fine. A cure sounds like it's probably a good idea. So she's like, I know for a fact that I got something in my leg here for the last 2 years. They show up and the Medwitch, who we still don't know her name because everyone seems to keep forgetting that that's a nice thing to ask about somebody's name. They just keep forgetting that. Anyway, she shows up. She's like, you give me permission to, use whatever venom I take out of your leg for tests for an antidote. And Bryce is like, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Do it. And she's like, just do it now, because the witch is like, because of the nature of the Crystallos, and like she does some scans and she's like, you have a lot of scar tissue, and like anytime it flares up, it's because this like black lightning in this image, that's the venom, and anytime it flares up, it's like reaching to these other areas and it's flaring up because this venom acts kind of like an organism. It's like semi-sentient, so anytime it just feeds off of you essentially, so it's going to try to convince you to stop getting it removed through pain and whatever else. So I'm just warning you that like common anesthetics they're not gonna work here. So like we could put you under, but it's gonna take a few days. And Bryce is like, nah, just get it done, get it over with, rip it off like a band-aid. So she gets strapped to this table and the med witch is like, okay, let's get you all prepped. And so she's helping prep up Bryce, and she comments on her tattoo. She's like, I love your tattoo, it's really beautiful. Like, I don't know the language, what's it say? And she's like, oh, it says through love all is possible. Basically that my best friend and I will be together forever. And she's like, that's really sweet. And then she looks at Hunt and she's like, who did your halo? And he's like, oh, some imperial old hag, one of the old ones. Capital O's for old and ones. And then he kind of like jokes, makes a passing remark like, could you remove it for me, whatever, because she's a witch, so theoretically, in theory, she could. And all she does is she just kind of looks at him and she's like, what would you do if I did? Would you punish those who have held you captive? And then he doesn't say anything because obviously this is a really dangerous conversation to be having. So he just says, we didn't come here to talk about my tattoo, but like in his eyes that says it all, and that basically says yes, I would. And she's just kind of like filing that away for later. But then she gets Bryce ready and she's like, this is gonna hurt. There's no way to avoid it, it's gonna hurt, but I'm gonna do my best. I'll talk you through it all. Here we go. So Bryce strapped down, obviously, so that she can't just like escape or move and hurt herself further. So she starts cutting into her leg, blah blah, taking all this stuff out. Bryce is obviously, this is like painful. Also low-key gives me throwbacks to Throne of Glass with Irene helping Chaol get the little bit of Vogue that was like in his spine out, because this med witch, her magic glows at her hands like Irene, and she's like, this thing is like a sentient organism, so it's not gonna want to leave, also like the Vogue. Anyway, I don't know if that's just coincidence or not, but both Sarah J. Maas, so what can I say? Just a commonality there. But that's besides the point. Anyway, they start taking the venom out. It hurts like a mother, so then Bryce is, clenching her teeth, whatever. Hunt scoops his chair over, holds her hand. He's like, you can do it. She's squeezing it, like she can feel his bones grinding, and he doesn't complain, whatever. And then as the pain ramps up and she starts screaming, whatever, he ends up like putting his brow on her brow, and he's like, hey, you can do it. We can do this together, being all really sweet. And she's like, he's actually being really sweet right now. And he's like, we'll do this, you and me. You got it, it's okay. And then the med witch is like, we're almost there, and you can hear her struggling to like rip this thing out. And she's like, we're so close, just a little bit longer. And so then Bryce is just screaming because pain, so much pain landscape her body. And then Hunt just presses the lightest brush of a kiss against her lips, as the book says. And then she's like, holy crap. And then the feeling is described as like starlight going through her whole body, and feels like something that had been dark for a long time was like lit up again. And then all of a sudden, pain gone, like a switch had been flipped. And then the med witch is like, well, here you go. Boom, holding it, and it's like this creepy looking clear worm thing. And she's like, my magic is stabilizing it, which is giving it this form. But otherwise, like if I didn't stabilize it, it would just be a puddle. But it's Don't let it fool you. This stuff is nasty. So she puts it in a jar, and then they immediately test it. And they use some, whatever, magic stuff, blah, blah, blah. Run the test. It's probably a lot more like a diluted version of synth, so, but it works, it's successful. And she's like, my goal, now that I know this was successful, is I want to be able to remove myself out of the equation, because she had been using her magic in that whole thing, and she's like, I want to be able to remove myself out of this so that the venom and whatever antidote we can create doesn't require me, and then it can be distributed largely across anybody who happens to run into synth, at least really highly concentrated dosages of synth. So then they go home. Hunt flies her home, lets her rest. She basically called out of work. Jess was pissed, but you know, whatever. As they are resting, they only get a brief moment of rest before Micah calls up. And he's like, get you and Miss Quinlan here now. So Hunt's like, oh no, this is... been waiting for this to happen, waiting for the shoe to drop. Here it is. So he flies her over, carries her because her leg is still healing after just being sliced open. And it's still, she's like limping because again, just cut right open. So then he's carrying her and carries her all the way to the door, and he's like, it's okay, deep breaths, like everything's gonna be okay. And she's like, okay, because she's clearly looking nervous, and he's looking nervous, and he's like, this might be the last time I smile for a long time, but I won't let her know that. They go in. Who's in this office but Micah, standing in front of his desk, or like behind his desk, and then behind him are Victoria and Isaiah. Isaiah's giving him this warning look like, don't step out of line. And then who else is in there but freaking Sabine and Amelie. They're all looking so smug, and Micah is like, it's been brought to my attention that you did something super stupid and idiotic, and I expected more from you. And Sabine's like, this should call for a death penalty, whatever, because, you know, a slave assaulted a free citizen. And then Amelie's like, wait a minute, she's like, I just briefly mentioned in passing, I didn't go crying like a pup to Sabine about it. And Micah's like, yep, there will be a punishment, but I'm gonna do one reserved for angels that's worse than death. And or like he calls it like a death for an angel or something like that. And then he's like, we will be doing the living death, capital L, capital D. He's like, we'll do the living death. And so then Sabine's looking smug, and then Amelie's like, oh, you know, I'm not pressing charges, like, this is going a little extreme, Sabine, we don't. And she's like, shut up. And then Amelie's like, oh, I'm not really. And Bryce is like, please, no, don't do it. And then Mike and Hunt's like, you know, yeah, fair, I did break the law and whatever, and I'll accept the living death. Better than being killed, right? So he's like, yep, just do it, whatever. So then he gets down in front of Micah's desk, takes his shirt off, whatever, because he knows what's coming, living death. Because Bryce doesn't know what that is. She looks to Isaiah, and he's like, that's when you cut an angel's wings off. And then she's like, oh, no, please don't do it. And then Victoria like holds her back, and she's like, they'll grow back in a few weeks, it's fine. Like, he'll live. And Bryce is hysterical, and Amelie's like, no, please no, we don't, this is really too far extreme, I didn't need this, this is not what I meant. And Sabine's like demanding retribution, because she's like, I need him punished right now, right here while I'm here, otherwise I think it'd be really interesting if your guest, Sandriel, found out about like how slaves can just do whatever they want, assault whoever they want in your city. And so Micah's kind of in a pickle. So that's when he was like, there will be punishment, but it'll be the living death. And then he takes out the sword out of nowhere, just like materializes, it seems. And so then Hunt's just like, yeah, do it clean and fast. And so then he just goes, whatcha, and then Hunt blacks out for a brief moment, and then comes back into Bryce like screaming, sobbing, whatever. She's like kneeling behind him, and his wings are just on the ground, flopping. Maybe they're not flopping, whatever they are though. They are bloody, as he just now stomps on the back, and he's like, yeah, I forgot how painful this is, because when the Fallen were first marked as the Fallen, they all went under this punishment. So he's lost his wings before. So it definitely sucks. But again, not dead. And even Micah tried to explain to Bryce to be like, he could be dead. I just saved him. But no, she's pissed, and then she and Sabine get into a yelling fight, and then Sabine is yelling back at Bryce, and she's like, I went to the Underking, I went to the Bone Quarter and spoke with the Underking, trying to summon Danica, whatever little bit of her spirit is left there, and she refused me. And you know why? It's because she lives in shame, because she knows she shouldn't be there in the Bone Quarter, because the Underking told me, Bryce, that you went there, you begged for her to take your place in the bone quarter. Begged, because you even thought that she died like a coward and she didn't deserve to have her spot there, and even you knew that like her death was cowardly, all that begging, whatever. And so she now lives in shame knowing that she should not be there, and she's stuck there for eternity, and her boat should have flipped over in the river. And Bryce is like, that's not why I did it, all this stuff, but they're not listening. And then Micah's just like, enough, get out of my office. So then they finally leave, and then med witches come, and they don't heal Hunt, obviously, but they, you know, stop the bleeding, and they don't give him first light because that would null the punishment, but they give him a bunch of pain meds and stuff, and they're like, it'll be fine, you know, give him these every 6 hours, blah, blah, blah. It'll be good. He'll heal in a few weeks, probably like 6 to 8 weeks or something, whatever it'll take for them to grow back. So Isaiah and Naomi then fly Hunt and Bryce back to her apartment and get him all situated, and he just is like passed out on her bed. Bryce has to go back to work the next day, so she calls Rune to go sit with Hunt and make sure that he, you know, takes his meds and whatever the schedule is. So Rune does that, and then she's at work, and while she's there, she decides to continue trying to essentially hack into Redner Industries through using Danica's old login, because she's like, what are the odds that they disactivated? Like, they probably forgot to remove her login, even though it's been 2 years since she has worked for them, but you know, they're so busy. Who would remember to remove a dead person? So she knows her username is Defender, kind of a fun little thing there. So she's been trying her passwords for like a week or a few days or something, and none of them are working, so she's just thinking, try some other ones, like Sabine sucks, doesn't work. And then she finally is like, wait a minute, through love all is possible. Types it, boom, it works, she's in. She's like, and then a lot of it's just like boring corporate work, whatever, but then she sees a folder called party invites, so she's like, Danica she's not organized enough to have something like that, and also if I ever sent her something, I would never read her work email. So she clicks it, and inside is a folder called Bryce, and she's like, now that's even more sus. So opens that thing up as well, and inside is a photo, and it's just of her leather jacket with the same thing. And so then she's like, she left me a clue this whole time, something about the jacket's a clue. So she runs upstairs and grabs her jacket, goes back down to the little library with HOEAB, and she's like patting the jacket, and then finds in the lining, there's like a hard lump. So she cuts it open, and out pops a flash drive. Bryce is like, oh my gosh, Danica left this for me. And LaHava's like, why would she do that? Like, why would she hide that? And she's like, well, let's find out. So they plug it in, and then they're both like watching some video, and they're like, holy crap, this is insane. Bryce gets home. Hunt woke up. Rune left about like 30 minutes before Bryce gets home. He's like, hey, you know, how's it going? He's conscious now after all the crazy pain of having his wings chopped off. She shows up, but she's white as a sheet, and he's like, what's going on? Like, what? And she's like, I found this. Explains what it is, and she's like, you need to watch these videos. Boom, plugs it into her laptop, shows Hunt the video. There's 3 videos on this USB. The first one, they're all like test trials of a lab video recordings, but no audio. And this first one shows this human girl. She's not looking great. She's like kind of skinny, whatever, and some like nurse lab science person comes in, and they like take her vitals, and they inject something in her, and then they leave and lock the door. And then you just wait for like 5-10 minutes, nothing, and then you see they send in 2 slaves, because they got the SPQM. They're 2 giant beefy veneer males, and they come in, and they're looking real sus. You can like guess why they were marked that way, because they're looking at this human girl in a way they should not be looking at her. And so the minute they lunge for her, though, she also lunges for him, and then Bryce and Hunt witness in this video horrendous things, that she somehow attacks them and like fully dismantles them, which should not be possible at all. And then they're remembering that theory, and it said it gives humans strength greater than a veneer for like a short period of time, and they watch as they turn into piles, and they're like, holy crap. But then they send in 2 more people, and she also tears them apart. And then after that, though, you can tell she's screaming. There's no audio, but you can see that she's clearly screaming something. And then she turns on herself, and then there's like 5 piles in this room. And so then they're sitting there like, holy crap, this is insane. So then Bryce is like, somebody must have known. Danica must have like found this and tried to escape it. She knew somebody was coming after her. That's why she left this for me. And like, she knew that this testing was not good. Like, synth was not good stuff. So clearly she's left a message for me, and clearly somebody like hopped up on synth, must have killed her and the pack. And so then Hunt's like, maybe that's it, but then like we gotta still figure out who and why all this stuff can. And so then they watched the other two videos, and they're very similar. Humans hopped on synth doing crazy stuff they shouldn't be able to do. Okay, and they're both looking horrible. It's late at night now, for the record. Then they're sitting there processing everything they saw, and then Bryce is like, hey, you kissed me earlier at the med witch's office. And he's like, yeah. Is that okay? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, did you want me to do that again? And she's like, I want to do it again. Get a little bit hot and frisky and about to get down and dirty. Until then, Bryce, the way they were sitting on the couch, he's sitting on the couch, okay? And obviously his back is very wounded. And so at some point he touched the back of the couch in pain because those are fresh wounds. And so then she's like, you're an idiot. How dare you you didn't say anything about being in pain. And he's like, yeah, you know, there's better things to distract myself with. And then she's like, absolutely not. Like, you're bleeding on my couch. I'm not about to do this with you right now. So then they get clean up the blood on his back that was freshly bleeding, whatever, all that jazz. She gets him his drugs, puts him to bed. He passes out like real quick, and then she goes to sleep. And then she wakes up at 3 a.m. and she's like, you know what? She had put in a request to go see her old apartment, and she's like, maybe some people know I'm about to do it, but it's okay. I'll just go do it real quick. She leaves again, 3 a.m. Hunt is still sleeping. She goes, and then she's a few blocks out, whatever. She sees there's like a fire. She can hear sirens, and she's like, why do I have a feeling that that is the building I'm trying to look for? Walks right by. Sure enough, that apartment building, boom, on fire. She's like, clearly someone caught wind of my request. And they took my request to the landlord to see the old apartment, and clearly they got here before me and they're trying to stop me, so I must be on the right track because the building is literally burning. It's on fire. But luckily she heard like some water dryad or nymph or something be like, everyone got out of the building safe. So she's like, at least there's that, I guess. But like, I feel bad because all these people just lost their homes because of me, because I put in that request. But like at the same time, validating that I'm clearly on the right track. So then she gets a text as she's about to go home from Therian, and he's like, if you get to the docks in 5 minutes, there's a deal going down right now, and I can take you there. And she's like, what, is it a synth deal? And he's like, nah, it's cotton candy. And she's like, okay, yeah, I'll go. And she debates, she's like, maybe I should text Rune or Hunt, but like, then they'll just say, wait for me to get there, and she doesn't have time. So she's like, I'm gonna do it right now. So she shows up. Therian is in his human form. He's on like a little wave skimmer thing, like a jet ski type deal, wave runner or whatever. And he's like, hop on, and it's like super quiet because he's the chief of intelligence dude. And so then she's like, well, okay. So she hops on, and he's like, it's this or swimming. And she's like, you know, low-key debating I should have swam because she's not having a fun time. But then they see the barge, and so then she's like, okay. And they're being really stealthy, and they're coming in, and they see the Viper Queen, and they're like, Bryce is like, that freaking liar. She lied to us about selling. She's clearly selling right here. And then she can see that there's like hooded figures, like humanoid, but she can't tell who they are by their shapes or anything. And then they see that they throw like this giant lump of gold, and they're like, Therian's like, that's a lot of money, like that's crazy. And then the boat they see clearer, and it has literally like the Viper Queen's, like the Viper eyes on it and whatever. And Bryce is like, can you get us closer? So he's like, let me do it. So they're scooting closer, and they can hear the Viper Queen. She's like, this should be enough for your needs, right? Like, I think this is gonna be the start of a beautiful friendship, right? And then Bryce can tell there's one figure of this group of 3 talking with the Viper Queen that's like, he's not looking happy. He's looking like really disgruntled or whatever, and like his body language is showing that he's like thinks the price was too much, or clearly is like something, he's not happy with the deal. And then he turns into the light, and then Therian is like, holy F, and Bryce is like, brain is just gone, because who should it be but freaking Hunt? It's Hunt! This man. Next thing Bryce knows, she's on the barge and she's like running up to Hunt being like, what in the F is this? And then he's like, Bryce, no, you weren't supposed to see this. And she's like, no wonder I freaking didn't recognize him because he has no freaking wings. But if I paid attention to the build, like it's totally his build. And then she sees the other two with him are Justinian and Victoria. And she's like, oh my gosh, like what in the world is going on? And he's like, this isn't what it looks like. I was trying to stop the deal after watching those videos today. Like I didn't want this to happen. I was trying to stop them. And then she's like, who are you? What in the world is happening? And then who should show up but Micah and Naomi and Isaiah and 6 other angels all in Legion gear. Boom, they show up. But then instead of arresting like the Viper Queen and everybody, they start all pointing exclusively at Hunt and Victoria and Justinian. And so then Hunt looks right at the Viper Queen and is just like, you suck. And she's like, Governor, you owe me a favor now. And then they all are like, oh my gosh, this was a setup. And she was like, yeah, I caught wind of some people, you know, wanting some stuff. And I told you, Athalar, like, everybody has a price. And you just have to figure out yours. And I figured out what your price was. And so Bryce is like, somebody tell me what the F is happening. And then they're like, basically, these three thought that they would buy synth so that they could use it to overthrow their masters and finish what they started back on Mount Hermon 200 years ago. And Bryce is like, no. Denial. Looks at Hunt, sees the pain in his eyes, and she's like, holy crap, it's true. And that is probably the worst part about it being true. So then, it gets worse. She finds out, not only is this whole thing happening, Hunt knew about synth a week ago. Like days ago, he knew about it, even though they just figured it out like within the last like 2 days. He knew about it days before that. She's like, how in the world did you already know? He's like, well, Micah had set me on a mission to kill 3 drug lords, and they told me that synth 2 years ago had been leaked out of Redner Industries, and some amount of it had made it onto the market, but not enough of it. There was only very little, and they told me that, yeah, that it was leaked, and then right now it started to pop up because somebody figured out the formula again. And so now it's popping up in wide-scale production. And then Bryce is like, who's the leak? And he's like, you know, it's really not that important. And Micah's like, Danica Fender. And then she's like, nope, that's not possible. And Hunt's like, yeah, she was the leak at Redner. And she turns out the reason Therian or whoever she'd been seen on that barge just before she died is because she was the one selling it, dealing it. She'd stole it, selling it for the money. And then she was also an addict herself. And Bryce is like, there's literally no possible way. No way. And they're like, think about it. Like, you guys took drugs literally all the time. What's one more drug? Like, of course she was an addict herself. And then Hunt's like, okay, yeah, take me in. Micah's like, you're not gonna finish the story. And he's like, we really don't need to finish. And then Bryce is like, tell me. And then Micah's like, yeah, tell her. And so then Hunt's like, okay. Actually, Micah's like, tell her you know who killed Danica. And then Hunt's like, really would rather not. And Bryce is like, what? Like, you know, you've known this whole time? And he's like, well, I kind of figured it out like a while ago, but because Danica was the leak and she herself was addicted to synth, she that night took too much synth and then she killed the pack herself and then her own self. And then Bryce is fully having a fit. She's absolutely not having a great time. And then Hunt goes, Bryce is like yelling at him like, you're a liar, like how dare you do all this stuff. And then he goes to like lunge for Bryce, and then boom, this gun appears out of nowhere on his head. And they were like, you move, Angel, you die. And Bryce, you know, she recognizes that gun anywhere, and she's like, oh, Fury, look who decided to show up. And of course, Fury would be like the one person who could sneak up, and even the Archangel wouldn't censor and all this stuff and question her. And so then Fury's like telling the Viper Queen, she's like, back off, all this stuff. Viper Queen listens to Fury, and Bryce is just like, don't even have brain power to process that. And so then Fury is like, okay, yep, we're just gonna move on from this. And she starts backing away with Bryce, being like, you're all done with her. Looks at Micah and is like, you're done with her. You're done with Bryce. And Therian's also like backing up and watching Bryce's back too. And then they explain also that the Crystallos had popped up because the amount of obsidian salt that's used in the formula equals the whole unholy number of the Crystallos. And so anytime it's been used, it's inadvertently, as a side effect, been summoning Crystallo's demons, and so then that would be why there was one that appeared the night she died, and they've been appearing more now around the city because synth is now more available, so people are using it, and they're accidentally summoning all these demons. So then Fury takes Bryce home, and on the way home she's like texting somebody, and then when they get to Bryce's apartment, Bryce figures out who it was. It was Rune, because Rune's waiting there, and Fury then leaves to probably go make sure the Viper Queen doesn't accidentally find some synth in her hands to still sell and figure all that stuff out. And so then Rune's there, and he's taking care of Bryce, and she's just sitting on the couch like staring at nothing because her heart is shattered, her world is shattered. Literally anything that could go wrong, like everything bad just happened. And then Fury comes back at some point, and she overhears Rune and Fury in the kitchen talking, and they ask what happens, and Fury says Justinian was crucified in the lobby of the Comitium. He's still hanging there. And then Victoria's fate was Micah forced her out of her body, took her essence, threw it into like a box, and then put that box underneath Justinian's crucifix. And then he has plans, once they're done with that, because Justinian is not dead yet, but if he's lucky, he'll die soon. Take that box, and they'll dump it in the Melanoe, however you say that, some trench in the middle of the ocean, which will then be so deep that no one can find it, and then she will be stuck forever in loneliness and darkness. An eternal fate like that. Rune asks about Hunt, and he's like, so he didn't kill Hunt? And she's like, no, he has other plans for Hunt. And he was like, Rune's like, well, what could possibly be worse than what happened to them? Like, what could possibly be worse than death or whatever happened to Victoria? And Fury's like, there's a lot of things. A lot of things are worse than that, Rune. And that is where we end.